What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today we're going to be talking about the current banner heroes, Summer Iseria, who only has 1 week left, as well as Alencia, and whether or not you should pull for them, and as well as what is coming in the future and what are some things you can expect to try to start thinking about your bookmark management, because that does play a role into it. So if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and join the Discord server. Link down in the description. But before we get to the video, I actually do have a couple of announcements. School started for me again, which means I'm going to be back on an erratic streaming schedule. I'm not going to have as consistent of a streaming schedule as I used to during the summer. The other thing is that I'm not going to be able to get new content out to you guys on the snap like I used to. So things like the buffs that we just got with Luna, with Moore, with Abakas Rabi, I do have all these units and I do have the gear to actually make all of them really good. They're all like maxed out, but I won't be able to be streaming that anytime soon, like probably not within the next week, because it is very, very busy at the start right now. So I do apologize for that. Hopefully you guys will still watch those videos when they come out, and maybe I can change your mind about a couple of heroes. But with that, let's actually get to the video. So first, with a summary on where we are, what's coming next, how you can start thinking about the bookmarks, as well as a summary of the units, and then we'll actually dive deeper into each of the units kits. So first, where we are right now. So one thing that they added is a selective summon when you clear episode 3, and I know that's very in advance, but it's really cool for the people that may want someone like the Alencia that they just have here, because this includes only the characters from episode 3, like Cecilia, Ilnov, Senya, Moore, Polides, Flynn, Ervalin. And one thing you have to know is that you're not guaranteed one of the units, right? You're summoning 30 times, and you keep one of the 10 pulls. But the thing you have to realize is you're not guaranteed to pull the unit that you want. And that does matter, because unlike re-rolling, you cannot re-roll for this one. It's just, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, it sucks, right? And I remember when I re-rolled for Sigrid on my side account, it took several times, even though it was 30 summons. So yes, it sucks, you may not get it, but you're very likely to get the unit that you want. So that's really cool. If you did really want Alencia, that is something that you have. The other thing that they had is the season 2 summon that I got, because the value is amazing. I suggest you get it if you've ever thought about spending in the game, because it's a free 5-star and a free 5-star artifact, as well as 8 summons. It's actually really good value. It's $1 per summon, which is better than any, like, most packs, if I remember correctly, right? And you're also guaranteed a 5-star, and you're guaranteed a 4-star artifact from season 2 or episode 2. So there's that. As far as units that are coming in the future, we most likely will not be getting any new limited heroes anytime soon, right? Because we just got off SSB, we just got off Fiend rerun, we just got off Amelia and Ram banners, and we just got off Summer Iseria. The next limited probably won't be coming until October, and it will most likely be a Luna rerun, right? So most likely what's going to end up happening is that we're not going to get anything until October, and that will be the Luna rerun. But that does mean that Luna should be right around the corner. Luna is typically run during the Halloween time. The other thing is that we will also be getting episode 4, I believe in November. I would need to double check on that one for the date, but episode 4 is also most likely going to bring a unit like Landy, who is a limited hero. If y'all remember when episode 3 came out, Landy didn't come too much after, and most likely it's going to be Rand, that dude with 2 swords we saw. He most likely will be limited in the future, so that's the units that are coming in the future. But right now, you're probably pretty burnt out on summons. So now, with that, since we know that you're low on summons, let's talk about these two and whether or not they're worth it. So as far as Iseria, if you just want a quick summary on her, she actually ended up being on the weaker side, right? So a lot of people thought she was going to be extremely broken, and she ended up just being okay, right? I don't think she's bad, but with limited heroes, you always want to have at least 1 copy of the unit and 1 copy of the artifact. Why do I say that? Think Luna, think Landy, right? Think even Cerise. All these units got buffed before they got their banners, right? Reran, right? So it's something that, like, you never know with Smilegate if they're gonna buff a unit and make it super meta in the future. And that unknown, right, is the reason why you always want to have the limited, because she won't come back for a whole year, right? Which is a very, very long time to wait if they do get a buff and you really, really like the unit. But again, you may be low. As far as to what she does, she's pretty good in Arena and okay in Guild Wars, right? And in RTA, she kind of falls in the same category as Spez, where it's just really hard to get a good team with her, but you can definitely make her work, right? So overall, she's not a bad unit. A lot of people will tell you she completely sucks. The thing about it that I will say is she's kind of whale in the fact that you need to have this artifact maxed out, right? The reason why is because without her artifact maxed out, she goes from being a pretty strong, like, well-rounded unit to just being mediocre because she's not consistent and she's not landing anything with the S1, right? So this artifact is arguably pretty whale. So it's something that if you're not able to get the artifact to at least like a high level and you're not able to get Iseria, it's going to be really hard to actually end up using her. So it's something that for free-to-play players, it's one of the reasons why I would say even if, in this scenario, if you can't get her, it's not the end of the world, right? It's not the end of the world if you can't get her or if you decide to save. I still recommend pulling at least one copy because she may get buffed in the future. Or there may be units that really support her, right? But as of right now, it is kind of whale. And the other thing is that it requires a lot of setup. You need someone to set up for her. If you have setup, that's why she's so good in Arena, right? In Arena, you have the perfect setup, and she's amazing in Arena because you have setup. In Guild Wars, it's a little bit harder to get the setup, which is why she's not as good. And in RTA, it's whether the opponent's going to let you get the setup or not, right? And if you don't get the setup, she definitely becomes a much weaker unit. So again, similar to a unit like Specimen says, where with the right team, they're amazing. Without, they're not that great. Now, as far as Alencia, she's definitely fallen off really, really hard. At this point, she's more of a niche pick. She used to be a PvP only, and she barely sees any play. I would honestly say save. If you really want her, get her from this selective summon, since she is in that banner, right? Although I would get Polides instead of her in this if you don't have Polides. But again, I mean, right now, you're probably burnt on bookmarks. Alencia has definitely fallen off the meta. She could use an EE to put her back. But as of right now, she's a very good, solid. I mean, she's still a solid bruiser for what she does, but it's just not her meta with all the like the good fire units that are out right now and all the damage threats that are out. She's usually a little too slow for the current meta. So now that we did the summary on both the units, so Summertime Iseria, try to pull one unit, although you may not end up using her, right? Because you do need the artifact maxed out, and she does need setup. And with Alencia, you should probably skip the unit right now because she is fun and she's cool, but it's just not her meta right now. And you can probably just get her from another of the summons if you don't already have other units that you want to get. But now let's look at deeper dive into Iseria's kit. Why does she need the setup, right? So first, as far as base stats, they're actually pretty solid base stats. The reason being that her passive gives her a ton of attack, right? Her passive gives her like, I believe it's 50% extra attack. So that's why her attack stat is so high. Her health is decent. The defense is decent. The speed is nice, right? And the effectiveness is also really, really high for a unit, right? Starting 30 effectiveness is actually really, really high. So overall, decent defensive stats, great attack. It makes sense for what she does. Her self-imprint gives her more effectiveness, which you do need to land the bombs. But outside of that, doesn't help her do more damage. But again, landing the bombs is pretty important for her. So now let's actually look at the skills and why it's so important for her to get the artifact. So first, the S1 is a 2 buff strip. Now, this is actually not a bad S1, right? Taking off 2 buffs is pretty good. The problem is that the artifact is what really makes this skill a lot better, because when you have the artifact, you're able to land bombs on the enemy when you don't crit. That is why she's considered kind of like whalish to be able to use to the max level, because without it, this skill doesn't do much, right? At 2 buff strip, there's several other units that do this, and also the soul burn just gives her an extra turn, right? So it's one of those things that, like, without the artifact, she's tied to her artifact essentially, and it needs to be basically a maxed out artifact for her to really get the bombs consistently. Because if you miss the bombs, it doesn't do anything. It's just an S1 that can strip, right? And the soul burn just lets her get to S3 quicker. That again doesn't do anything if there's no bombs, right? So it's one of those things that she really does rely on that artifact a lot to make the skill good. But with the skill, if you do have the artifact, you are planting bombs with this S1, which is really, really nice. And we'll see what bombs do in a second. The second part is going to be her passive and where she gets the attack. So this is where she gets the increase in attack to 50%. And why she has such a high base attack stat is because this is already taken into consideration. The other thing is that she will not crit, which does allow her to activate the artifact and makes her slightly easier to build. And then, of course, the other part is going to be the other part of the passive, that when an ally, except for herself, uses an AoE skill, you will plant a bomb onto enemies, right? So this means that you need to open with something like Cerise, you need to open with something like Operator Sigrid, you need to open with a stripper that does AoE, right? The reason being is if you open with something like a Landy, this is not going through immunity and you essentially lose the passive, right? So you need to open with a cleanser, or not with a cleanser, with a stripper to be able to actually effectively use this. Then the other part that's actually pretty nice is that if you do open with an AoE skill, you do get 15% CR push as well as the bomb. So at worst, if they keep their immunity, you are able to still push up your team, which does allow her to follow up. The one thing also to realize is that this skill does lose to Pleiades, right? So that's something to keep in mind because Pleiades is becoming more and more popular. But again, this is the main bread and butter of Samurai Iseria, and it happens every 3 turns. You AoE with a Cerise or an Operator Cigarette, you strip the opponent, she sets up 2 bombs, she gets a CR push, and then she comes in and is able to Soulburn S1. The first one will not cost souls, so as you see there, this first one does not eat up souls. And then you can use the Soulburn again to get an extra turn. This does allow her to actually reset the passive essentially if you do have a single soul carrier, and it will also allow you to set up multiple bombs if you have multiple souls, right? So that would be 2 bombs if I bring a soul book holder. If not, it's just an extra bomb. And then we come in with the S3 that is going to be an AoE attack that decreases the enemy's attack, gives you increased speed so you're able to cycle faster and do more S1s, and it also will detonate the bombs, making it so the opponent cannot just cleanse them, right? So this skill overall pretty cool. Like, the animation is sick, by the way. The animation is amazing. I'm on the process of building my Samurai Iseria, and I will hopefully showcase her at least in Arena. But the S3 animation is gorgeous, right? So I love the S3 animation. I'm a big fan. I think it looks really cool. I think it's pretty awesome, right? And it does detonate the bombs, so you will get that extra damage on the enemy and trigger those bombs. And the bombs, what they do is they do pretty good damage. I mean, it's not crazy damage. It's not like double burn carrot types of damage, right? But it's up there, right? It's about the same, honestly. It's about the same damage as like burns. But the nice part is that you do stun them, and the stun does not check effectiveness. So that's the nice part. The only reason you need effectiveness is to actually land the bomb. Once you land the bomb and it triggers, it will actually stun the enemy 100%, and it will not ignore FRS. That part is honestly what makes bombs so scary, is the guaranteed stun afterwards, right? Which is the reason why people thought she was going to be like a broken unit, because I mean, getting a free stun and damage is very, very scary, right? Especially in certain cleave comps, right? So that is going to be Summer Iseria's kit. So where would you use her and how would you use her? So because she relies on a team, you need a stripper, right? You need a Cerise, you need an Operator Cigarette, you need someone that's setting up for your Summer Iseria that is stripping them. Then you will get the bombs, and you get that nice advantage of stunning and getting some damage, right? This is the reason why she's so good for Arena, is because you're able to essentially use Bazaar, use Cerise, use Operator Cigarette. In a scenario where they're not going to get banned, you get the guaranteed follow-up with Samurai Iseria, you get the guaranteed bombs, you get the 15%, and then you're able to cut in S3, trigger the bombs, and do good damage. And essentially that just makes it so the other 2 units can just clean up, right? And of course, the S1 also does add a couple bombs. Right? The only problem with it is that Pleiades, as we mentioned, does counter her, because this skill is a non-attack skill. So you do take that Pleiades damage. You also don't get as much CR push. So just know that Pleiades does do really good into her. If you're taking to Arena, you have to know how to deal with the Pleiades properly, so you're not just getting demolished by Pleiades, right? So you want to make sure that you know what you're doing, because you will not be able to cut into a Pleiades, right? For Guild Wars, there's no Pleiades, but it's a little harder to set up. Since again, I mean, it still works. Just Cerise and her will do pretty decent. So yeah, you can definitely use it for Guild Wars. For RTA, it's a little hard to get the draft where she will get to pop off. But if they don't ban your stripper and they let her through, right? Because that's a thing, right? Because you need not only 1 or 2 strippers, you need AoE damage dealing units, and you need her. They can just ban her or ban one of the strippers. But if you do get the combo, it can actually be pretty scary. And it usually, I have had to force ban some Samurai Iserias because of the fact that if they get the bombs off, they basically win the game off of the stuns, right? So it's something that if you do manage to get the right team in RTA, it can work, but it is going to be very hard for you to actually get the proper team. And of course, you still need that max out artifact so you're able to land the bombs, right? So that's why Samurai Iseria, overall, I don't think she's bad. I think people underestimate how impactful a bomb detonation actually is. Losing a turn guaranteed through the bombs is really annoying. If you have a Soulburn and you're able to consecutively use this S1 and you get advantage from the S2, if you're able to lock down my units with this S1, it can get actually pretty frustrating, right? And you can definitely cycle the bombs to have it so when you trigger this, you can set up the next bomb and essentially perma bomb a unit, right? So there's a lot of stuff you could do. Overall though, hard to use, hard to draft in RTA, which is why it's I mean, she is viable. It's just hard to use, and it does require you to have that max artifact so she can actually do something off of the S1. But now, as far as on the other side, we have none other than our girl Alencia. So as far as Alencia, I mean, she used to be an amazing unit, but she's fallen off a lot just because she feels a little slow. Stat line wise, she actually has a really solid stat line. Not much attack, which she doesn't particularly need. Ton of HP, really good defense, decent speed for a bruiser, and no effectiveness, no FRS, right? So pretty solid stat line, right? Pretty solid bruiser stat line. And she does have self-health to make her even tankier. Now, as far as the skills into what they actually do, first you have the S1. That at face value doesn't look crazy, but essentially, single target damage skill that decreases defense for 1 turn. You can soul burn it to get a 100% chance to decrease defense for 2 turns, right? So if without it, it's a 75% chance to actually decrease defense. With the soul burn, it's a 100% chance, but it can still get 15%ed. But if you do land it, it's 2 turn decrease defense. What's also really cool, then it comes to her passive. When she is hit, you have a chance to proc Mind's Eye. You have a 50% chance to proc Mind's Eye for 1 turn. What it lets you do is during your turn is your trample becomes a skill that allows you to do an extra attack, right? So the S1 will do this skill, and then she'll go in and do another attack, which is a lot of single target damage, right? Because she scales off of health, right? Which is why she doesn't particularly need attack. She does scale off of health, so she can be very tanky and do pretty good single target damage. The other thing is that when you do trample, you also lower the cooldown of your S3 by 1 turn, and again, based on HP. The only problem with Alencia, and this is where some of the problems start to show up, is that your opponent is required to hit her, right? If they don't hit her, you don't get that extra S1. You don't get that extra bonus of lowering the S3 cooldown. That reliance on getting hit by the opponent and still having a BRNG is the reason why. That's one of the weaknesses that Alencia has, is you're not guaranteed Mind's Eye, which means you're not guaranteed that big follow-up S1 trample that is also lowering your S3 cooldown, right? That's a small weakness. It's part of the balancing the character. It used to be really amazing in the past just because she would get hit so often. And then of course you have the S3, which is a AoE skill that dispels debuffs on the all buffs on the enemy and also gives you increased defense. And of course, again, you're scaling off of HP. This skill, actually a pretty solid skill, right? AoE strip and increased defense. Really, really solid. The thing, she used to be used a lot for this to crack a lot of the bruiser heavy buff teams. Think back in the day when DN was super amazing, right? Now most people just use Landy. But back in the day, you needed a stripper, right? You needed someone to pressure the opponent, and you would be picking someone like Alencia, because not only do you get a defense buff and make your team tankier, you're also stripping the opponent, and it can be really crushing, because it's not just 2 buffs, it's all buffs, right? So very, very solid S3. The problem now, though, is that they changed scaling in RTA. Before, RTA used to be a straight damage scaling rather than a attack scaling like it is now. So she doesn't do as much damage in Frenzy as she used to because she scales over HP, and HP gets lower with Frenzy, and she doesn't get that damage boost. She only gets attack boost. And the other part is also going to be the fact that there are just better options to use than her, right? Because this does strip, but that doesn't mean you have to use it with effectiveness. And if you don't have effectiveness, it means you're not landing this. Whereas someone like Landy can just eat through a buff team rather than having to rely on stripping them, right? And Landy gets speed buff, and Landy does more damage than her, right? So it's one of those things that she has very much gotten power creep. The other thing is, like with Carrot in the meta, she can't really do anything against Carrot. Carrot just eats her alive. And also even Charlotte to an extent, right? Charlotte will just eat her alive as well, because Charlotte is going to be doing way more damage than her, right? So a lot of the current meta bruiser DPS units just outscale her. She can't really hit a steady, right? So it's one of those things that she can't compete in the current day and age properly, but is still really good as a bruiser style stripper, right? But again, she does get outscaled. Does have a decent matchup into Ram though, because against Ram you're actually able to land this defense and do decent damage. But again, the S3 being AoE, you're very likely to trigger that Ram counter, and it's not going to be fun for you. So overall, she used to be an amazing unit. She used to be like a top tier unit, but now she's definitely fallen off significantly. She barely sees any play, and if she does, it's mostly as a pseudo stripper type unit for those Crimson Armament teams, and you will see her with high effectiveness. So she's actually able to land this on those Crimson Armament teams to actually be able to pressure the opponent, right? So she still has a place in the meta, but not nearly as strong as she used to. But that is going to be all I have for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.